Hello students, I am Professor Dr. Adarsh Kumar. Today I bring you the next learning episode in BSc Forensic Science on behalf of the content writers myself and Ms. Tulika Banerjee on an important unit of paper Forensic Anthropology, that is Forensic Facial Reconstruction part 2. In the part 1 we had discussed about the types, techniques and steps of forensic facial reconstruction. Today in this lecture, that is part 2, you will be introduced to the concept of Frankfort's plane. You will also learn about the horizontal plane of the skull and how to take various linear measurements of the cranium along with the measurements of face also. Also, you will be acquainted with the importance and accuracy of forensic facial reconstruction and its role in post-mortem depiction. Lastly, we will wind up this module with the conclusion. So, let us start our module with a look at what we are going to learn today. Module 1 will be introduction of the Frankfort's plane, module 2 will be the horizontal plane of the skull, module 3 will be the linear measurements of the cranium, module 4 will cover the how to take measurements of face, module 5 will deal with the importance and accuracy of forensic facial reconstruction, module 6 will deal with the importance of forensic facial reconstruction in postmortem depiction, and module 7 will be the conclusion. Let us see how it developed over a period of time. It has been some time past when anthropologists in Germany have been commendably endeavoring to come to a common agreement amongst themselves as to a technique of measuring skulls which would be commonly, or one can say universally, adopted. In order to attain this purpose, a Craniometric Conference at international level was held at Munich in 1877 and afterwards in Berlin in year 1880. The outcome of the deliberations of these conference was a scheme drawn up by Professor Coleman, Janke and Virchow, which was submitted for consideration to the 13th General Congress of the German Anthropological Society held at Frankfurt on Main in 1882. This scheme was adopted and designated the Frankfurt Agreement. The Frankfurt plane or common verbatim Frankfurt plane, the difference of the spelling is only U or O, both are widely used, and this is entered as Frankfurt horizontal plane in several medical dictionaries. Even though Frankfurt is the modern standard spelling of the city, that means U, for which it is named, was established at the international level meet of World Congress on Anthropology in Frankfurt, Germany in 1884 and ruled as the anatomical position of the human skull in various fields of forensic anthropology. It was agreed upon that a plane passing from end to end the inferior margin of the left orbit, the point called the left orbital, and the upper margin of each ear canal or external auditory meatus, a place called the porion, was utmost nearly parallel to the surface of earth, and also it was found close to the position of the head is generally carried in the living subject. The plane is also titled as the Auricular orbital plane. Now, let us see what is horizontal plane of the skull. In the Craniometric Conference, which was held at Munich and Berlin, the German horizontal plane, that is the definition, was accepted as follows. Quote, that plane which is determined by two straight lines, one on either side of the skull, joining the lowest points present on the inferior margins of the orbit with the point that are present over the upper margins of the bony external auditory meatus, that is practically situated perpendicularly above their centers. In this context, German horizontal plane is used to measure the direct length of the cranium along with the height and the maximum breadth too. Not only this, but the breadth of the forehead and likewise various other cranial measurements are taken, like the angle of inclination of foramen magnum and the profile angle of the human face, and quite a lot of other facial measurements to be computed and are described further on. The Craniometric Conferences mentioned at that time had also come to a conclusion and decided to take a number of other measurements which are actually independent of the horizontal plane of the skull. So, that various and valuable older dimensions which have not been made in relation to our horizontal plane and therefore, not exactly as good as it be not rendered valueless. Further, what is more for the significant reason that in cases of a broken skulls in which the facial region is needed, as is commonly the case among the maximum vital primeval skulls, a precise establishment of the German horizontal plane is extremely difficult and let us say next to impossible. So, in these cases it is definitely desirable to handpick fixed anatomical points already present on the skull as starting points intended for the principal measurements in place of making us uncertain subjective evaluation of the probable condition of the plane and of the measurements in relation to it. It is actually by the use of these points that it becomes possible to take measurements taken minus reference to the German horizontal plane accord with those made in reference to that plane. The requirement for these auxiliary measurements free of the German horizontal plane was specifically recognized by both craniometric conferences for determining the length of the skull. Both in order to measure the exact height of the skull, the similar need is very obvious. Similarly, an auxiliary measurement which however positioned at some distance from the base of the skull is often indispensable to define the breadth of the cranium. They are maximum length and that length the interior measuring point of which is positioned in the center of a straight line joining the epicenters of the frontal eminences. Both these lengths are measured with the help of calipers. In the subsequent list, the terms of the most significant measurements of the skull are produced, which will help in understanding explanations of the procedures of ascertaining each. Now, let us see what are those various linear measurements of the cranium. First is the horizontal length. From the middle point between superciliary ridges on the glabella to the maximum protruding point at the back of the cranium measured parallel to the horizontal plane of the skull with the help of the sliding compass. In situation where it is found that the glabella is greatly advanced, it is desired when imaginable to measure its thickness. Now, next measurement is the maximum length. From the midpoint in the middle of the arcus superciliaris to the most bulbous point on the back of the head. It is also measured with the help of calipers, that too without reference to the horizontal plane. Then third measurement is the intertuberal length. It is from the middle point in between the two frontal eminences to the most protruding point present at the back of the head without reference to the horizontal plane and is again measured with the help of calipers. Then the maximum breadth. This is measured perpendicularly to the median plane with the help of the sliding compass, where it is not only on the mastoid process or on the posterior temporal ridges. The points of measurement must lie on the same horizontal plane. Then fifth measurement is the minimum frontal breadth. It is the shortest space found between the frontal ridges near their base, which is measured by the sliding compasses or the calipers. Now, sixth measurement is the height. The so called total height of Virchow is actually the measurement from the very center of the anterior border of part known as the foramen magnum to the parietal curve. Its measurement is done vertically to the horizontal plane with the help of calipers. The variance found in height of the anterior and posterior borders of the foramen magnum will thus be indicated, through which the Bayer-Acker height is evaluated. Next measurement is the auxiliary height. In case where the skull is broken, as previously mentioned, where the facial position is not good enough, the horizontal plane cannot be determined. So, as an auxiliary height which approaches very nearly to the total height, the height on or after the center of the anterior border of the foramen magnum to the point at which the sagittal and coronal sutures come across, that is the brachma of Broca, should be measured by means of the calipers. Now, next measurement is the ear height. from the point that is the upper border of the auditory meatus to the point of the vertex of the head positioned perpendicularly above it, measured straight up in the relation to the horizontal plane of the skull. Then comes auxiliary ear height. It is from the same starting point to the highest point of the parietal curve, about 2 to 3 centimeters behind the coronal suture. Then next is the length of the base of the skull. The distance from the middle of the interior border of the foramen magnum to the middle of the nasofrontal suture. Length of the basilar portion, it is to the spheno-occipital suture. Then 12th measurement is the greatest length and breadth of the foramen magnum. This is measured in the median plane and transversely to it. Then breadth of the skull base distance between the summits of the mastoid processes, distance between the most prominent points on the outer surfaces of the mastoid processes. Then 14th measurement is the horizontal circumference of the skull, measured with the steel tape placed immediately above the superciliary ridges and over the most prominent point on the back of the head. Then sagittal circumference of the skull. It is measured from the nasofrontal suture to the posterior border of the foramen magnum along the sagittal suture. The next measurement is the vertical transverse circumference of the skull. It is measured from the upper border of the one auditory meatus to that of the other perpendicularly to the horizontal plane 2 to 3 centimeters behind the coronal suture. Now, first in this is the breadth of the face of Virchow. This is the distance between the two jugomaxillary sutures. The measurement must be made from the under and anterior point of the one suture to the corresponding point of the other. Now, next is the breadth of the face of one holder. This is divided into two, 1A and B. 1A is the distance between the two inner angles of the malar bones, whereas other one is the distance between the 2 points situated vertically below the apices of the inner angles of the malars on their under borders. Now, second measurement is the bi-zygomatic breadth. This is the greatest distance of the zygomatic arches from one another. The interorbital breadth is the minimum distance between the inner borders of the entrance of the orbital cavities. Now, the height of the face. It is the distance from the middle of the frontonasal suture to the middle of the under border of the mandible. Next measurement is the upper face height or the middle face height, from the middle of the frontonasal suture to the middle of the alveolar border of the upper jaw between the central incisor teeth. Now, next is height of nose. This is the distance from the middle of the frontonasal suture to the middle of the upper surface of the nasal spine, that is to the lowest border of the pyriform opening. The next measurement is the maximum breadth of the nasal cavity. It is the distance measured horizontally. The next is the maximum breadth of the entrance of the orbital cavity, from the center of the median border of the orbital cavity to its lateral border, that is the clear space between the two borders of the orbital cavity. The next measurement is the maximum horizontal breadth of the entrance of the orbital cavity. This is measured as parallel to the horizontal plane, otherwise analogous to the breadth of the entrance of the orbital cavity. Then the maximum height of the orbital cavity. This is measured vertically to the greatest breadth between the upper and lower borders. Then 10th measurement is the vertical height of the orbital cavity. It is measured vertically to horizontal breadth of the entrance of the orbital cavity of Virchow, otherwise analogous to the height of the orbital cavity. Then 11th measurement is the length of the palate. It is measured from the point of the palatal spine to the inner lamina of the alveolar border between the central incisor teeth. Then comes the middle palatal breadth. It is measured between the inner alveolar walls opposite the second molar tooth. Posterior palatal breadth. It is measured at the posterior ends of the palate, that is between their inner alveolar borders. Next measurement is the length of the profile of the face, also called as Coleman's facial length. It is actually measured from the most prominent point of the center of the outer alveolar border of the upper jaw to the anterior border of the foramen magnum in the median plane. Then comes the profile angle. It is the angle which the profile line makes with the horizontal plane. The measurement of other angles of the face and cranium still remains to be determined. Procedure for obtaining Frankfort's mandibular plane. In actual practice, on pupil, the Frankfort's mandibular plane angle can be obtained by means of the following method. The finger and thumb of the right hand are extended palm down. The fingers are kept together while the thumb extends from the palm of the hand at approximately 90° angle from the fingers. The thumb is placed in the area at the subnasion on the person and nathion or the chin. This will rest in the angle of the hand formed by the thumb and palm. A slight upward pressure of the hand with the fingers extended under the lower border of the mandible to gonion will clearly outline the lower border. So, with the left hand, place a rule lightly against the patient's face connecting orbital and tracheon. Have the rule extend posteriorly beyond tracheon at least 6 to 8 inches. Now, place other rule along the line formed by the palm and upper border of the index finger with the lower border of the mandible. The Frankfort's mandibular plane angle will be formed at the intersection of two rules. The following picture depicts how to take this measurement. From the time facial reconstruction was scientifically introduced to the world in the late 19th century by anatomist William His, there has been a great deal of research into the reliability and accuracy of this technique. On one hand, scientists argue that the techniques are too subjective and rely significantly on individual artistic skill, resulting in reconstructions that are inaccurate. On the other hand, some researchers insist that FFR demonstrates good level of likeness sufficient to be employed in forensic identification and justified if there are no other tools available to identify human remains. Wilkinson and Whitaker in year 2002 reported optimistic results on the reliability of facial reconstruction. They employed 5 forensic cases from the West serial murder investigation in Gloucestershire, United Kingdom. The 3D facial reconstructions using the combination manual method were produced from 5 juvenile female skulls and then compared to a face pool by 50 assessors. The volunteers were asked to select a face from the face pool that most resembled each reconstruction. The mean hit rate was 44%, where the rate by chance was 10%, demonstrating that facial reconstruction can produce a good resemblance to an individual. In contrast, Stephen and Hanberg investigated the accuracy and reliability of facial reconstruction of 16 reconstructed faces, implying 4 skulls and 4 different 2D and 3D facial reconstructions methods. The facial reconstructions were then assessed by 37 volunteers with facial photographs in a face pool. Only one facial reconstruction showed true positive identification at above chance rate and 403 incorrect identifications were made in 592 identification scenarios. So, the researchers maintained that facial approximation or reconstruction should be considered highly inaccurate and unreliable as a forensic identification technique. Further, accuracy studies on computer generated facial reconstructions have been performed. Wilkinson et al. Produced facial reconstructions from 2 CT scanned skulls with a computer generated 3D modeling system. These 2 reconstructed faces, a white male and a female, were tested for accuracy employing face pool comparison methods. The assessors were asked to match the facial reconstructions to the face from a face pool of 5 CT scanned faces, including the target face that best resembled the target face. Results demonstrated that combined hit rates for both facial reconstructions were 50% above the level recorded by chance, that is 20%. So, researchers subsequently completed a morphometric comparison using 3D surface software, that is rapid form TM, to assess the quantitative accuracy of facial reconstructions. Results showed that 67% of the facial reconstruction surfaces had less than 2 mm error compared to the scanned target face, suggesting high validity for computerized facial reconstruction. So, reviewing the studies on the accuracy of FFRs, it appears that there are disagreements between researchers over the levels of accuracy and their reliability. Claes et al. And Wilkinson, they pointed out that facial reconstruction is not a method of identification. The final goal is not complete accuracy in reconstruction, but rather success in recognition. In assessing the limitations involved in assessing the accuracy of facial reconstructions, we are reminded that most successful facial reconstructions are recognized or identified by those familiar with the person in question, whereas current empirical accuracy tests are based on unfamiliar face recognition due to practical and ethical difficulties. It is established that people are much better at recognizing familiar faces than unfamiliar faces. It is therefore suggested that reliability of forensic facial reconstructions should be considered in light of the problems encountered in measuring success with accuracy rates. Nevertheless, recent research demonstrated an acceptable accuracy level for identification in both manual and computerized methods. Forensic cases have proved that the technique of facial reconstruction can be used to assist in the identification of individuals from unknown skulls, particularly when other forensic tools are unavailable. The scarcity or the dearth of literature on post-mortem facial depiction in forensic science is a puzzle. Techniques for reconstituting the physiognomy of individuals when decomposition or environmental exposure has rendered these faces unrecognizable after death remain an area of research largely unexamined. Decomposition is the destruction of tissues which is enacted by the chemical autolysis, or the external factors like insects, carnivores or environmental, and is known collectively as taphonomic processes. The post-mortem facial depiction is most frequently employed by the forensic artists who utilize artistic ability, their knowledge of hard and soft tissue facial anatomy, and an understanding of the processes of body decomposition as well as taphonomic effects. A hand drawn sketch or a computer assisted resemblance of the individual face is produced in the hope that a public presentation results in recognition. When artifacts in association with the body are available, for example, clothing, jewelry, evidence of hair type or style, or notable features of the head or face that may still be partially discernible, the artist is able to incorporate such information into the depiction. The forensic artist may work from photographs of grossly blotted, discolored and distorted faces, often with missing facial features. So, if crime scene image collection is inadequate, further photographs should be taken at the mortuary or following exhumation. The post-mortem depiction is utilized for deaths that are natural, suicidal or homicidal. In homicide deaths, blunt or sharp trauma and gunshot wounds to the face are frequent. The forensic artist may work from photographs of grossly bloated, discolored and distorted faces, often with missing facial features. If crime scene image collection is inadequate, further photographs should be taken at the mortuary or following exhumation. The post-mortem depiction is utilized for deaths that are natural, suicidal or homicidal in manner. In homicide deaths, blunt or sharp trauma and gunshot wound to the face are frequent. The extensive damage to the face also occur as a result of accidents involving traffic, drowning and fire etc. A number of reliable descriptions of changes brought by decomposition, including the effects of variant environments, have been documented over the last 3 decades. They inform and guide facial image depiction as the forensic artist attempts the close approximation of an in vivo appearance of the deceased as possible. knowledge about a relatively rare product of body decay, that is adipose shear, is very limited. The relevance to post-mortem facial prediction is that facial features are preserved with little alteration to appearance, a condition favorable to reconstituting a desirable, publishable, sketched or computer assisted facial depiction. Same happens in case of mummification. Photographs of the deceased may, with the addition of skills in image manipulation and alteration utilizing photo editing tools in software programs like Adobe Photoshop, allows the forensic artist to create a facial appearance acceptable for publication. The removal of mortuary or crime scene backgrounds from the photographs, the editing of wounds, blood and other substances from the face in combination with the reduction of blotting and discoloration, which are then replaced with the neutral tones, normalized contours, open eyes and relaxed facial expression, can transform the most graphically damaged visage to one that may spark recognition. The databases of facial features amassed and classified by age, sex and ethnicity can be pasted and blended as layers when insufficient clarity of detail in the damaged face promotes extrapolation of normalized appearance. It must be said, however, that the more distorted the post-mortem image, the greater the need for experience and expertise with regard to decomposition and greater the demand for estimation and interpretation. Data comparing differences in decomposition patterns that reflect sex, ethnicity, age, variant craniofacial shapes and facial features are necessary. This reality is strikingly apparent when one considers the range in origins and ages of victims in mass disasters like Bali bombings in 2002, tsunami in 2004 and Hurricane Katrina in 2005. The psychological barriers encountered by friends and family who suffer through identifying loved ones in the aftermath of disasters are compounded by the complications that the decomposition in hot climate imposes, as evidenced by 50% false visual recognition rate of victims by families in the Bali bombings. The Frankfort Plane was established in 1884 and used as the anatomical position of the human skull in various fields of forensic sciences as well as forensic anthropology. Breadth of the face of Virchow is the distance between the two jugulo-maxillary sutures. Height of the face is the distance from the middle of the frontonasal suture to the middle of the underborder of the mandible. Profile angle is the angle which the profile line makes with the horizontal plane. The aim of forensic facial reconstruction is to recreate the facial appearance of a deceased and unidentified individual, so that it is sufficient in resemblance to facilitate recognition. The post-mortem facial depiction is most frequently employed by forensic artists who utilize artistic ability, their knowledge of hard and soft tissue facial anatomy and an understanding of the process of body decomposition and taphonomic effects. The post-mortem depiction is utilized for deaths that are natural, suicidal or homicidal. With all these information, here we come to the end of today's lecture. Do keep in mind what we discussed today. I will be back with one more lecture in this series. If you want to learn more and enhance your knowledge, you may log on to our website www.cec.nic.in for MCQs, quizzes, LORs, etc. Thank you for your time today. I will see you in the next lecture. Have a great day.